Was Gaius Terentius Varro the worst general in ancient history? And by that I mean he was in command at the Battle of Cannae, which is considered the worst military defeat up to that time and long after, possibly of all time. The text in Polybius would seem to indicate that that might be the case. This came up recently in a Roman history forum post. I wanted to write a lengthy reply. It just got too lengthy, so I decided to do this video instead, and I'll send a link to that reading forum, and I'll link this to my 5-minute overview of the Battle of Cannae, which I will do shortly hereafter. But this was a pressing matter I wanted to address. So here's where I think the problem arises. Sometimes you'll see something on the History Channel or read something on Wikipedia. It's a very cursory description of what happened, and it's, you know, a good place to start. But when you get into a little more in-depth reading, you'll find that, as with almost all things, there are nuances. Things aren't quite cut and dried, and there are more permutations to consider. So even if you read, say, this translation of Polybius, which is a new modern English translation, American English translation, let's read what it has to say about Varro after the battle. And it says, let's see, it's in 116. This is book 3, chapter 116. He says, among the few who escaped to Venusia, this is after the battle's over, was the Roman consul Varro, a man of no redeeming qualities, who did his country great disservice as consul. Now, Paulus is the other consul during the battle, and it was Varro. I guess consuls took turns when they were together and had this giant army. They alternated on days who was in overall command. So Paulus declined battle one day, and then Varro accepts battle the next day. So Varro's in command. Ultimately, it's his responsibility. And he survives, and Paulus dies. So it's, you know, easy to say, he ran away. He was inept. He was the junior commander in the sense that Paulus had experience commanding in the field, and Varro was considered a uomo nuovo, new man, as it were. But I guess in Latin, homo nova. So there's indications that that's the case. However, if you get into another translation, this is from 1922, and this is translated by Peyton, is the gentleman's name. Let's read what he has to say. Let's see, I'm looking for book 3, chapter 116. I have it bookmarked here. There we are. So he says, a few escaped to Venusia, among them being the consul Gaius Terentius Varro, the same guy, who disgraced himself by his flight, and in his tenure of office had been most unprofitable to the country. Now, this is still negative, but it's not quite as negative as a man with no redeeming qualities. So instead of saying that, he says, who is disgraced by flight. Now, there's a footnote here. Now, this footnote says the alternate way to read this would be a man base in spirit, instead of who disgraced himself by flight. Now, those are two completely different phrases. How does this occur? Well, if you look at the Greek, and you don't even have to be able to read Greek, but if you look at the Greek lettering, look at how close this is. Okay? It's only a character or two off. So you can imagine somebody found a manuscript, probably tattered, probably old, handwritten, of course, and they were unable to, translate exactly. I had to be creative. These two words, this word and this word, that's the phrase that he uses. Peyton uses in his 1922 translation of Polybius, and he says, "Who disgraced himself by flight," instead of a man who's base in spirit, or a man of no redeeming qualities, which is what Robin Waterfield says. So, it's up for interpretation, but let's say, that the Romans were going to follow their previous strategy and not engage the Carthaginians, not engage Hannibal. That's what Fabius the Delayer had done up to this point. It seems unlikely that they were going to use an army of 8 legions in order to bottle up Hannibal. In fact, it's pretty clear in 108, Book 3, passage, let's see, it's in 108, the older version. Therefore, after exhorting Aemilius Paulus, and putting before his eyes the magnitude of the results which in either event the battle would bring about, they dispatched him with orders to decide the issue when the time came, bravely and worthily of his country. To decide the issue. Okay? Now here's Waterfield's translation. Let's see. Looking for 108. Before sending Aemilius on his way, then, they, meaning the Senate, impressed upon him how critical the battle was in terms of possible outcomes, one way or the other. He was instructed to decide the issue when the time came, with courage and as Rome would expect of him. This is not an army that was set out to delay or counter. This was an army that was sent out to decide the issue, to destroy Hannibal once and for all. At least that's the way I read it. If you disagree, that's fine. If you want me to clarify, that's fine. Leave comments below. We'll continue this discussion.